Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I've never been good at telling stories, but I feel like I need to get this out. Maybe writing it down will help me process what happened. Maybe someone will find this useful if they're in a similar situation. I don't know. It was supposed to be just another Saturday at the Tulsa Firearms Expo. I'd been looking forward to it for months, saved up overtime pay for this exact weekend. My buddy Kyle and I arrived early around 8:15 a.m. to beat the major crowds. The expo center was already humming with that distinct energy that only comes from thousands of gun enthusiasts gathered under one roof. The air smelled of gun oil, leather, and coffee. Classic rock played from speakers mounted in the corners. Vendors arranged their wares with practiced precision. Handguns laid out in neat rows. Rifles propped up on display stands. Boxes of ammunition stacked in colorful pyramids. Normal. Everything was so frustratingly normal. I remember checking out a custom 1911 at one of the booths, admiring the craftsmanship. The vendor, an older guy with a salt and pepper beard, was telling me about the hand-tooled engravings when the first shot rang out. Everyone froze. In a place full of firearms, an unexpected discharge is the last thing you want to hear. Several heads turned toward the food court area. A woman screamed, then another. My first thought was some idiot had violated basic safety rules and accidentally fired a round. Probably just some jackass who doesn't know trigger discipline, Kyle muttered beside me. The vendor shook his head. Don't think so. Security's pretty tight about checking weapons in. More screams erupted, followed by several more gunshots in rapid succession. Not an accident then. People began moving away from the food court, first walking briskly, then running. Active shooter? I asked no one in particular. The vendor was already reaching under his table. Get down, he commanded, pulling out what looked like a compact Glock. Kyle grabbed my shoulder. We should get out of here. That's when I spotted him, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt navigating through the crowd. Initially, I assumed he was a shooting victim. Then he rotated, revealing that half his face was simply gone. Not cleanly removed, but dangling in ragged fragments, as though something had torn away his cheek and eye socket. Blood cascaded down his neck, saturating his shirt. Yet he moved, not with a lifeless shuffle, but with deliberate intent toward a woman paralyzed with shock. Jesus Christ, Kyle whispered. The man lunged at the woman, sinking his teeth into her shoulder. She screamed, a high-pitched wail that cut through the general panic. 2 security guards rushed over. One pulled the woman away while the other struck the man with a baton. The man showed no reaction. He pivoted toward the guard and charged. Someone shouted, "He's been shot, look at his chest." I squinted and saw bullet holes in the man's torso. 3, maybe 4 entry wounds, but no fresh blood emerged. Only dark congealed stains marked the impacts. The guard backed away, drawing his sidearm. "Sir, get on the ground now!" The man, no, not a man anymore, advanced relentlessly. "Sir, this is your final warning." The guard fired twice, center mass, following standard training. The shot struck precisely in the chest. The figure stumbled momentarily but continued forward, its jaw snapping rhythmically like some terrible feeding mechanism. "What the f?" Kyle breathed beside me. The guard fired again, another chest shot. Nothing. Then someone from our right fired a shot. This one caught the thing in the forehead. It dropped immediately, collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the woman who'd been bitten began convulsing on the ground. The security guard knelt beside her, calling for a medic. People backed away, creating a circle around the scene. "We need to leave," Kyle said, pulling at my sleeve. "Now." But it was already too late. The expo's main doors burst open, and more of them poured in. 5, then 10, then more than I could count. Some wore security uniforms. Others were in casual clothes. All moved with that same driven purpose. All had visible wounds, bites, gashes, exposed bone. All headed straight for the nearest living person. "Back, get back!" The security guards formed a line, firing into the approaching crowd. People scattered. Some ran for the emergency exits. Others ducked behind vendor tables. A few, the ones who came armed despite the expo's rules about keeping guns unloaded, pulled out weapons and began firing. That's when the real chaos started. Gunshots everywhere, no coordination. People shooting at the infected but hitting innocent bystanders. The infected not falling unless hit in the head. Blood on the polished concrete floor. The metallic tang of it mixing with gunpowder in the air. The vendor grabbed his display case. "Help me with this!" he shouted. Kyle and I flipped his table on its side. Other vendors did the same, creating a makeshift barrier. Someone nearby had a rifle case, which they added to our growing fortification. "Only headshots work!" someone shouted from across the hall. "Gotta hit the brain!" As if to demonstrate, a man with military short hair took careful aim with a handgun and dropped one of the infected with a clean shot to the forehead. The creature collapsed mid-stride. More gunfire. More screams. The infected spread throughout the exhibition hall, attacking anyone they could reach. Those who were bitten fell quickly, convulsed, then rose again minutes later to join the attackers. "It's like a fucking zombie movie," Kyle said, his voice cracking. The word hung in the air. Zombie. It sounded ridiculous, childish even. But there was no other word for what we were seeing. A stocky man in camo pants and a black t-shirt crawled over to our barricade. Blood streaked down his arm from a cut on his shoulder. "Glass," he explained, "not a bite." He introduced himself as Billy. "We need to coordinate," he said, maintaining a remarkable composure. "Everyone's firing wildly. We're gonna have more friendly fire victims than infected kills at this rate." He was right. Through gaps in our barricade, I glimpsed the exhibition hall transformed into chaos. Smoke from gunfire drifted beneath the ceiling lights. People huddled behind whatever shelter they found. Display cases, merchandise tables, support columns. The infected prowled between them, stopping only when their brains were completely destroyed. "I count at least 30 of those things," Billy continued. "But there are hundreds of us. If we work together, we can secure this place." "Why not just leave?" Kyle asked. "The emergency exits, already tried." Billy cut him off. "There are more outside, lots more, and they're attracted to noise. Every shot fired brings more of them running." The vendor, who introduced himself as Frank, nodded grimly. "We're better off securing a perimeter in here. We've got guns, ammo, and barriers. Outside, we've got nothing." Marcus nodded. "Exactly, but we need organization. Otherwise, we're just wasting ammo and killing each other." A woman edged over to our position. Keeping low, blood spattered her glasses, but she seemed uninjured. "I overheard," she said. "Name's Diane. I'm an ER nurse. If we're staying, we need a medical area too." I surveyed our small group, then the mayhem beyond. The exhibition hall stretched enormously, over 100,000 square feet. Food court at one end, main entrance at the other. Between stood rows upon rows of vendor booths. The central area contained larger displays, vehicles, tactical setups, specialty items. What should have been a day of exploration had become a fight for survival. "Okay," I said, surprising myself by speaking up. "Where do we start?" Billy pulled a pen from his pocket and sketched a rough map of the exhibition hall on the back of a product flyer. "We need to establish a safe zone first. Corner position, 2 solid walls. The admin offices might work." He pointed to an area near the food court. "Then we need to clear it, section by section," Frank added. "Sweep for infected and survivors." "And we need weapons distributors," I said. "People to gather ammo and distribute it to those who know how to use it properly." "And a medical station," Diane reminded us. "For the wounded." We all assessed each other, strangers united by catastrophe. Beyond our makeshift shelter, screams and gunfire persisted while the infected pursued new victims. "I'll coordinate the sweep teams," Billy said. "Frank, can you handle weapons distribution?" Frank nodded. "I know most of the vendors. They'll work with me." "I'll set up the medical area," Diane said, "but I'll need supplies and help." They all looked at me and Kyle. "What do you need us to do?" I asked. Communication, Billy replied. Run between groups. Keep everyone informed of what's happening. Make sure everyone knows headshots only. And find more people to help. People who aren't panicking, who can think clearly. A burst of gunfire nearby emphasized the urgency of our situation. Let's move, Billy said. And just like that, we had a plan. It wasn't much, but it was better than the random violence happening around us. As Kyle and I prepared to move out from behind our barricade, I glanced down at the custom 1911 still sitting in its open display case. Frank followed my gaze. Take it, he said. And these. He handed me 2 magazines. If you know how to use it? I did. 3 years at the range every weekend had taught me that much. I checked that the weapon was loaded, then tucked it into my waistband. Kyle armed himself with a compact shotgun from another display. Remember, Billy warned us, headshots only, and conserve ammo. This could be a long day. As we slipped out from behind the barricade, I had no idea just how prophetic his words would be. The next few hours blended into a grim routine of calculated violence and frantic organization. Kyle and I traversed the exhibition hall, gathering survivors into coordinated groups. Some joined willingly, recognizing the benefit of collaboration. Others proved challenging, having fortified positions behind displays and greeting any approach with suspicion. We're establishing a secure area, I explained to a group of 3 men who had taken refuge in a tactical gear booth. Near the admin offices, safer there, strength in numbers. How do we know you're not bit? One asked, aiming at my chest. I raised my hands slowly. Check us if you want. No bites. We're just trying to organize. This free-for-all isn't working. After a tense standoff, they lowered their weapons and agreed to join us. By midday, we had gathered nearly 100 survivors in the admin area. Billy had led sweep teams through nearby sections, systematically eliminating the infected. Frank had assembled an impressive arsenal, everything from handguns to high-powered rifles, with ammunition meticulously sorted by caliber. Diane had converted a conference room into a functional clinic, treating wounds with first aid supplies gathered from throughout the building. The infected continued to wander other sections of the exhibition hall, but our corner stood defended. Fortifications of overturned tables, display cases, and tactical vehicles blocked all approaches. Armed sentries monitored each barricade, prepared to neutralize any infected that ventured too close. We were holding on, but just barely. And beyond our makeshift sanctuary, the outside world remained an ominous mystery. Around 1 p.m., we managed to get a radio working. Frank found it at one of the tactical supply booths, a high-end emergency model with a hand crank for power. We gathered around it like ancient people huddled near a fire, desperate for any connection to the world outside. Static. Endless static across most frequencies. Then, finally, a voice. Repeating, "This is an emergency broadcast. The Centers for Disease Control has confirmed an outbreak of an unknown pathogen in multiple cities across the central United States. Those infected pose an extreme danger to others. If you encounter an infected individual, do not, I repeat, do not attempt to reason with them. Maintain distance and seek shelter immediately." The broadcast continued, explaining that National Guard units were being mobilized, that quarantine zones were being established. But even through the clinical language, the underlying message was clear. The authorities were overwhelmed. Help wasn't coming anytime soon. Billy paced the small admin office, his mind clearly racing. We can't count on rescue. Not anytime soon. He turned to face the group. But we're sitting on a gold mine here. Weapons, ammunition, tactical gear. If we're smart, we can turn this place into a fortress. Frank nodded, warming to the idea. The Expo Center has everything we need. Food court for supplies, concrete walls, controlled entry points. And we're literally surrounded by thousands of firearms and millions of rounds of ammunition. But what about the infected still inside? Diane asked. We've secured this corner, but there are hundreds of them wandering around out there. We clear them out, Billy said simply. Systematically, section by section, secure the entire building. Then we can think about expanding the perimeter to include the parking lots. It was ambitious, maybe even crazy. But looking around at our makeshift command center, at the 100 frightened civilians depending on us for protection, I knew he was right. Moving outside was too risky. Our best chance was to consolidate and fortify. Where do we start? I asked. Billy approached a large floor plan of the expo center that someone had taped to the wall. We've secured the admin area and about a quarter of the main exhibition hall. That leaves the rest of the exhibition space, the food court, the west wing, and the storage areas. He drew a red line around our current territory. We create sweep teams, 5 people each, 2 shooters up front, 2 watching the flanks, 1 watching our 6. We move systematically, clearing each section before moving to the next. Ammunition isn't a concern, Frank said, gesturing toward the exhibition hall. We've got more firepower here than a small military base. I've already started cataloging what we have. Everything from handguns to tactical rifles, even some heavy stuff like the Barrett 50 cal sniper rifles at the precision shooting booth. That said, we should still be smart about this, Billy replied. No need for spray and pray. Every shot should count. There was a sporting goods booth in section C4. He pointed to an area just beyond our perimeter. Hunting knives, machetes, even some compound bows. We can use those for close quarters work. Save the loud stuff for emergencies. It was a solid plan. Yeah, risky, but with potentially enormous payoff if we succeeded. We spent the next hour organizing teams and preparing for our first sweep. Billy would lead the initial team, with Frank coordinating defense of our safe zone. I volunteered to lead the second team, which would follow once Billy's group secured the sporting goods booth. Billy's team moved out first, advancing cautiously into the exhibition hall. Through gaps in our barricade, I watched them progress, 5 figures moving in tight formation, communicating with hand signals, eliminating infected with brutal efficiency. Billy carried a tactical AR-15 with an EO-Tech holographic sight, while 2 of his team members wielded Benelli M4 combat shotguns. They encountered only scattered resistance, individual infected wandering aimlessly between display booths. Within 20 minutes, they'd secured the sporting goods booth and radioed back for my team to advance. We'd follow the same route, then push further to secure the adjacent food court. I led my team out, Kyle on my left with his Mossberg 590 tactical shotgun, a woman named Laura, who'd been a cop before all this, on my right with a Glock 17, and 2 men named Ramirez and Doug watching our flanks with AR platform rifles. I kept the custom 1911 in my waistband, but held a lightweight Daniel Defense M4V7 that Frank had insisted I take. The exhibition hall looked different from this angle. No longer a place of commerce, but a combat zone. Blood spattered the concrete floor. Bodies lay where they'd fallen, heads ruined by bullets or bludgeoning. We reached Billy's position without incident. His team had established a small outpost at the sporting goods booth, distributing hunting knives and machetes to volunteers who were following behind us to establish new barricades. Food court is next, Billy told me, pointing to a set of double doors about 50 yards ahead. Be careful in there. Tight spaces, limited visibility. My team advanced toward the food court, tension coiling in my gut with each step. The doors were partially ajar, darkness beyond. I signaled for Kyle to cover me, then pushed through, sweeping my rifle's tactical light across the space. The food court had been the site of fierce fighting during the initial outbreak. Overturned tables. Bodies sprawled across the floor. Blood everywhere. Smeared across tables, pooled on the tile, spattered on walls. The metallic smell of it hit me like a physical force. Clear the perimeter first, I instructed. Then we check behind the counters. We moved methodically around the edge of the seating area, checking beneath tables, behind trash cans, in every shadow where an infected might be lurking. We found 3, all heavily damaged but still mobile, crawling across the floor with single-minded purpose. Kyle dispatched them with his machete, grimacing at the wet sound it made passing through their skulls. The counters were more challenging. Each food vendor's space was separated from the seating area by a service counter, creating blind spots. An infected could easily be crouched just out of sight. I'll go first, Laura volunteered. Used to clear houses on patrol. Same principle. She approached the first counter, a coffee shop. and vaulted over in one smooth motion, landing in a crouch with her weapon raised. A moment of tense silence, then, "Clear." We continued this process through 5 more vendors: pizza place, burger joint, Chinese food, smoothie bar, pretzel stand, all clear. The last space was a taco shop at the far end. Laura prepared to vault over, but as she approached, a hand shot out from beneath the counter, grabbing her ankle. She cried out, tried to pull away, but the grip was too strong. She fell hard, her head striking the counter edge. "Laura!" Kyle shouted, rushing forward. An infected rose from behind the counter, a food service worker judging by his uniform, now drenched in blood. He lunged toward Laura's prone form, mouth opening impossibly wide. I fired twice. The first shot missed in my haste, but the second caught him in the temple. He collapsed across Laura, who shoved the body away with a disgusted gasp. "You hit?" I asked urgently, helping her up. "No," she panted. "Grabbed my boot, didn't break skin." We all sagged with relief. If she'd been bitten, we'd have had to deal with her before she turned. "Food court secured," I radioed back to Billy. His response was immediate. "Good work. Check for supplies, then set up a defensive position. Next team will relieve you in 30 minutes. We searched the vendor spaces, finding a treasure trove of bottled water, canned goods, and non-perishable snacks, enough to sustain our group for several days at least. We also discovered a storage room with cleaning supplies, which would be useful for clearing up the biohazard that parts of the expo center had become. By 3 p.m., we'd established a secure corridor from our initial safe zone in the admin area to the food court. Teams were working systematically through other sections, encountering variable resistance. Some areas were clear, while others contained pockets of infected that required careful coordination to eliminate safely. Our defensive strategy evolved as we reclaimed more territory. Instead of hunkering behind barricades, we established outposts at key intersections, controlling movement between sections. This allowed us to respond quickly to any threats while maximizing our effective coverage. Frank organized an armory in one of the secured vendor booths, cataloging our weapons and ammunition. The inventory was impressive, hundreds of handguns ranging from pocket .380s to high-end competition 1911s and race-tuned Glocks. Shotguns of every configuration from hunting models to tactical door breakers. Rifles spanning the spectrum from bolt-action precision shooters to military-style semi-automatics with every accessory imaginable. Most impressively, several vendors had brought heavy weapons for display. A few fully transferable machine guns under ATF supervision, a Barrett M82A1 .50 caliber anti-materiel rifle, and even a restored Vietnam-era M60 machine gun with blank firing adapters for demonstrations. Diane expanded the medical area, now treating injuries sustained during the clearing operations. Cuts, bruises, a broken wrist from a fall, but thankfully, no bites. Around 4 p.m., a commotion erupted at our northern perimeter. A sentry shouted an alert, and gunfire erupted. Billy grabbed his rifle and sprinted toward the sound, me close behind. We arrived to find 3 volunteers firing into a service corridor, where a group of infected was pushing through a door someone had failed to secure properly. "Hold your fire," Billy commanded. "The noise is just drawing more attention." He was right. Every shot fired was potentially attracting more infected from uncleared sections of the building. But there were at least 8 infected in that corridor. Too many to engage safely with melee weapons alone. Billy thought quickly. "Funnel them," he ordered. "Ramirez, push that vending machine to narrow the corridor. We'll create a choke point. Take them out one by one as they come through." Ramirez and 2 others muscled a heavy snack machine into position, creating a narrow passage through which the infected would have to navigate single file. Billy stationed himself at this choke point, knife ready. The first infected stumbled through the gap, and Billy dispatched it with a clean thrust to the temple. The second met the same fate. By the third, I joined him, alternating kills to prevent fatigue. By the time the last infected fell, we'd eliminated the entire group efficiently, saving ammunition for when we really needed it. "This is how we do it," Billy told the gathered volunteers, gesturing to our makeshift choke point. "Smart, tactical, even with all our firepower." There's no need to waste rounds. As our clearing operations continued throughout the afternoon, teams became more methodical, more tactical in their approach. Improvised weapons appeared, pipe sections from maintenance areas, chair legs, fire axes from emergency stations, complementing our growing arsenal of conventional firearms. The assault rifles and shotguns remained our primary tools, but for close quarters work, the quieter methods proved just as effective. By 6 p.m., we'd cleared approximately 60% of the main exhibition hall. Diane organized volunteers to begin the grim work of disposing of bodies, using industrial trash bags and cleaning supplies from the food court. The dead were dragged to a loading dock at the rear of the building, as far from our living areas as possible. At 7:00 p.m., Billy called a leadership meeting in the command center we'd established in the admin area. The floor plan on the wall now had most of the exhibition hall colored green for secured, with red sections indicating areas still to be cleared. "We've made good progress," Billy began, "but we're facing a new challenge." He pointed to a large storage area at the rear of the building. "According to the floor plan, there's a loading dock back here with 3 bay doors. If any of those are open or damaged, we could have infected entering from the outside continuously." "We need to check it," Frank said. "Secure those doors before we expand further." Billy nodded. "I'll take a team. Cooper, you're with me. Kyle, too. We'll need someone who knows the building's layout." A volunteer named Hector raised his hand. "I worked setup for these expos for 5 years. I know every inch of this place." "Good," Billy said. "You're with us, too. We leave in 15 minutes. I used the break to check in with Diane, who was organizing food distribution from our newly secured court. "How are supplies looking?" I asked. "Better than expected," she replied. "The vendors were fully stocked for a 3-day expo. If we're careful with rationing, we can sustain 100 people for at least a week." "And medical?" Her expression darkened slightly. "Basic first aid, we're fine. Anything more serious?" She shrugged. "We're improvising, but no bites so far, thank God." Billy assembled our team near the boundary of the secured area. Besides himself, me, Kyle, and Hector, he'd added 2 more volunteers with combat experience. A former Marine named Ramirez and an older man named Carter who'd served in Desert Storm. Everyone was armed with high-quality tactical firearms from the expo. Billy with his customized AR-15, Kyle with the Mossberg, and I'd swapped to a lightweight SIG MPX 9mm carbine better suited for indoor corridors. Ramirez carried a SCAR-17 battle rifle, while Carter had opted for a classic M14 with a modern chassis system. "Here's the plan," Billy explained, showing us the route on the floor plan. "We follow this service corridor to the main storage area, then proceed to the loading docks. We assess the doors, secure any vulnerabilities, then return. Should take 30 minutes max." We moved out, advancing in tight formation down the service corridor. Unlike the exhibition hall, which was open and spacious, these back areas were cramped and poorly lit. Emergency lights provided minimal illumination, creating pools of light separated by stretches of near darkness. Hector led the way, guiding us through the maze of corridors. "Loading docks should be just ahead," he whispered. We turned a corner and entered a large storage area filled with stacked chairs, folding tables, and other convention equipment. At the far end, light filtered through windows high in the wall, illuminating 3 large bay doors used for loading and unloading trucks. One door was partially open, raised about 3 feet from the ground, and through that gap, infected were squeezing into the building one by one. "There's our breach," Billy murmured. "Looks like we found their entry point." I counted at least a dozen infected already inside, with more visible beyond the door. They hadn't noticed us yet, focused on squeezing through the opening. "We need to close that door," Kyle said. "And deal with the ones already inside," Carter added. Billy assessed the situation quickly. Carter Ramirez create a diversion to draw the ones inside away from the door. Cooper, Kyle, and I will handle the door controls. Hector, watch our backs. It was a solid plan. Carter and Ramirez moved to the far side of the storage area, then deliberately made noise to attract the infected. As the creatures shambled toward the distraction, the rest of us circled around to the control panel for the bay doors. "Cover me," Billy said, examining the panel. "It's still operational. Emergency power." He pressed the button to lower the door. With a grinding metallic screech, the mechanism engaged, and the door began its agonizingly slow descent. The noise attracted the infected. Those outside began pushing more frantically at the narrowing gap. Those inside turned from Carter and Ramirez's distraction, now focused on the new sound. "Hold them off," Billy shouted, standing his ground by the control panel as the door continued its slow closure. Kyle and I formed a defensive line, unleashing controlled fire into the approaching infected. The MPX was perfect for this: lightweight, minimal recoil, and devastating at close range. Each 3-round burst dropped an infected with precision. Behind us, Ramirez's Scar roared, its heavier .308 rounds practically disintegrating the skulls of his targets. "Fall back to the corridor," Hector cried from behind us. More coming from inside the building. I glanced back and saw what he meant. Another group of infected was approaching from the direction we'd come, drawn by the noise of the bay door and our gunfire. "Stand your ground," Billy ordered. Doors almost closed. The gap beneath the bay door was now less than a foot high. The infected outside were still trying to squeeze through, but they were struggling with the limited space. Inside, we'd dropped at least 15, but more kept coming from both directions. "Reloading," Kyle shouted, ejecting his empty magazine and slapping in a fresh one with practiced speed. I continued firing, the MPX's suppressor reducing the muzzle blast to a manageable level as I systematically eliminated the approaching threats. Each burst placed precisely to sever the brainstem. Finally, the bay door clanged shut, sealing the outside breach. Billy moved immediately to help us with the remaining infected inside. Between the 3 of us, we cleared them out, using a combination of gunfire and brutal close-quarters combat with our blades. When it was over, we stood panting amid a scene of carnage. Bodies lay sprawled across the storage area floor, dark blood pooling beneath them. The stench was overwhelming, death and decay amplified by the enclosed space. "Everyone okay?" Billy asked, scanning our team for injuries. We checked ourselves and each other. Miraculously, no one was bitten. Scratches, bruises, sprains, but nothing that would turn us into one of them. "We need to check the other doors," Hector reminded us. The remaining 2 bay doors were secure, but we discovered another vulnerability. A personnel door beside the loading dock that had been propped open, presumably by someone trying to escape during the initial chaos. "Secure it," Billy ordered. Ramirez pushed the door shut and engaged the deadbolt. Then, for good measure, we pushed a heavy storage shelf in front of it. "Loading dock secure," Billy announced into his radio. "But we've got bodies to clear. Lots of them." We made our way back to the main area, reporting our findings to the broader leadership group. The discovery of the breach explained how infected had continued to appear in supposedly cleared areas. With the loading dock now sealed, we could focus on clearing the remaining infected inside without worrying about constant reinforcement from outside. By 9 p.m., exhaustion was setting in. We'd been fighting, organizing, and fortifying non-stop since early morning. Billy recognized the need for rest and established a rotation system, allowing people to sleep in shifts while maintaining adequate security throughout our expanding safe zone. I found Kyle sitting alone in a quiet corner of the admin area, staring at his phone. The battery was long dead, but he kept pressing the power button periodically, as if hoping it would miraculously spring to life and connect him to the outside world. "You should get some sleep," I told him. "I'll wake you for the midnight rotation." He nodded absently, still staring at the dark screen. "Do you think anyone's coming for us? Military, National Guard?" I considered lying, offering some comforting platitude. But if the world was ending, false hope seemed crueler than truth. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I do know we've got a defensible position, supplies, and weapons. That's more than most people have right now. I keep thinking about Lisa and Emma," he said. "If they're okay, if they made it somewhere safe." There was nothing I could say to that. The chances that his family had found safety were impossible to calculate. So instead of speaking, I just sat beside him in silence. offering what little comfort my presence could provide. Around 10 p.m., I made a final round of our secured areas before turning in for a few hours of sleep. Our territory had expanded significantly throughout the day. We'd cleared roughly 80% of the exhibition hall, the entire food court, and most of the service areas. The only major section still unsecured was the West Wing, which housed smaller conference rooms and additional exhibition space. Entries were posted at strategic points, rotating every 2 hours to maintain alertness. Barricades had been fortified with additional materials. The vending machines from throughout the building had been gathered in the food court, creating a centralized supply area. Diane's medical station was running smoothly, with volunteer assistants helping manage minor injuries. Frank approached as I completed my inspection. "Not bad for day one," he commented. "You think we can hold it?" I asked. He gestured around at what we'd accomplished. "We've got walls, weapons, and warriors. That's a hell of a lot more than anyone outside this building has right now." I nodded, surveying our makeshift fortress. It wasn't pretty, and it certainly wasn't permanent, but it was defensible. And in this new world, that counted for everything. "Tomorrow we clear the West Wing," I said. "Then we start thinking about expanding the perimeter to include the parking lots. One step at a time," Frank replied. "But yeah, I think we're going to make it here." As I finally lay down to rest using my backpack as a pillow on the office floor, I realized something strange. For all the horror of the day, for all the death and violence we'd experienced, we'd also built something. A community. A sanctuary. In less than 24 hours, we'd gone from panicked individuals to organized defenders. Outside our walls, the world might be falling apart, cities burning, infrastructure collapsing. But in this small corner of Tulsa, we'd carved out a haven. Armed with knowledge from thousands of gun enthusiasts, tactical experts, and survival specialists who'd gathered for the expo, we had perhaps the best chance of any group in the city. I closed my eyes, physically exhausted but mentally alert, turning over plans for tomorrow. The West Wing would be challenging. Lots of small rooms, potential ambush points. We'd need to be methodical, thorough. I must have drifted off eventually. Because the next thing I knew, Billy was shaking me awake. The luminous dial of his watch showed 2:01 a.m. "Your shift," he said simply. As I took up my position for the night watch, I found myself thinking about the custom 1911 I'd taken from Frank's display case a lifetime ago. It felt right in my hand, like it had been waiting for me, for this moment in history. I'd come to the expo looking for a good deal on a firearm. Instead, I'd found a fortress in the making, a community being born amidst catastrophe. The infection that turned living people into monsters was spreading across the country, maybe the world. But here, in the Tulsa Expo Center, we were holding the line. Not just surviving, but building something that might last. Dawn would bring new challenges, clearing the remaining sections, reinforcing our defenses, establishing more permanent living arrangements. But for the first time since that initial gunshot had shattered the normal world, I felt a flicker of hope. We had guns, more guns than any civilian group in the country. We had walls, we had each other. And sometimes, that's all you need when the world ends.